All right, hello everyone. Welcome to a very special Valentine's Day edition of our liv.talk webinar series. Today we're going to be focusing on landlord-tenant relations. So we're going to first be covering how to make a good first impression, strategies for effective communication, red and green flags landlords and renters should be aware of, and much more. Before we get into all this, though, we should quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Greg, and I'm the creative content writer here at liv.rent. I've been writing about all things real estate and renting for over 2 years now, and I've also been a renter myself for nearly 10 years. For those who aren't already familiar with us, liv.rent is an all-in-one rental platform based in Vancouver and available across Canada. We like to distinguish ourselves on creating a safe and trusted rental community, which we do by verifying both users and listings. We do this so the landlords can interact with confidence and easily find their perfect match. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to my co-host today, Paula.
Hi everyone, my name is Paula. I'm the Business Development Manager here at liv.rent. And among other things, my job is to make sure that our trusted community of landlords and renters are getting the most out of the liv.rent experience, and that they do have the tools they need to find safe and happy rental arrangements.
Awesome, thank you, Paula. So as I mentioned, the topic of today's webinar is navigating rental relationships, strategies for effective landlord-tenant communication. So whether you're looking for the perfect place or the perfect tenant, renting is a lot like the dating process, or ABC's The Bachelor for anyone who's seen that. So today we're going to be going over 3 important topics to hopefully help you find your perfect match. The first topic is going to be getting the first impression rose. So for both renters and landlords, first impressions are very important, as we all know. When a renter views a listing or when a landlord interacts with a prospective tenant for the first time, they've already started forming opinions of one another. So we're going to look at some tips on how you can make the best first impression possible and attract your perfect landlord or renter match. Next up, we're going to be talking about red flags and green flags throughout the rental process. So before you commit to anything, or lease agreement especially, you should watch out for some red flags that can arise along the way. So we're going to be going over exactly what you should look out for to avoid a relationship disaster later on. And we're also going to talk about green flags that say this person is ready for a relationship and worth the commitment. And finally, the last topic today is going to be happily ever after. Maintaining a relationship is never easy, so we're going to be looking at how you can maintain clear lines of communication and build a happy, long-lasting rental relationship together. Okay, before we dive into all that, let's take a quick look at who we have with us in our audience today. So it looks like the majority of our audience are landlords, over half, but there are lots of renters here as well. So thank you for everyone for joining us. And we're glad to see that both parties are equally invested in creating positive, stress-free rental relationships together.
Yes, that's for sure. Thank you all for being here with us today and participating in our live chat as well. It's also nice to see that everyone's at a different stage in their landlord-tenant relationship. It looks like most of our audience members are in a casual rental relationship, though a good number of you are in a committed landlord-tenant relationship as well.
Yeah, definitely got people at every stage in the rental relationship here. We're also going to be doing a couple of polls throughout the course of the webinar today, which you'll see pop up on your screen as we go. So let's get the first one going now before we talk about getting that first impression rose.
Yes, for sure. Let's do it. We want your honest thoughts here. Have you ever had a less than perfect relationship with your landlord or tenant? Let us know and we'll share the results later.
Yeah, please do. Now, before we get into the first part of our webinar, let's take care of some quick housekeeping items. So to make the most out of your webinar experience today, please remember to turn off your ad blocker, and also please create an account so you can unlock all the features. So in order to participate in all the polls like the one on screen now, and get the most out of this webinar, you'll need to quickly make an account, and this is different from your liv.rent account for anyone who has one of those as well. And please be sure to chat with us, send us any questions you have in the live chat, and we'll try and get back to as many as possible during our Q&A portion. Okay, so now that we're done with all the housekeeping items, let's get started with our first section, which is going to be how to get the first impression rose and set yourself apart from other contestants. So, as all of our renters in the audience know, competition is very tough out there for rental housing right now. As interest rate increases push mortgage rates higher, landlords have had to raise the rent prices accordingly, which often makes it tricky to secure housing on a budget. One way renters have adapted is choosing digital rental platforms that allow them to showcase their reliable history as a renter and boost their chances of getting that perfect home. The rental scene really began to move online during the COVID-19 pandemic, as I'm sure we're all aware, and I honestly don't think it's ever going back now.
I don't think so either. Well, like you said, the rental community has done a great job of adapting to the post-pandemic world. For us here at liv.rent, things like verified profiles and listings, as well as our trust score tool, gives landlords and tenants a better idea of who they are talking to, so you can schedule in-person showings with confidence.
For sure, and digital tools do help you find the real thing, so definitely good to use those when possible. 10 years ago, meeting someone online was still very taboo, but now everyone's using apps like Tinder and Bumble to date, and renting's definitely no different in that regard. Renting has seen a ton of progress since the start of the pandemic too, so things like 3D video tours has made it much easier to show and view rentals online, and have really become a popular way of kind of viewing things from across the world.
Oh my God, for sure. I love those. I think in general, people of practically every age group are getting used to doing pretty much everything online these days. liv.rent is easy to explain to people when we jokingly call it the Tinder for home rentals. And if that's true, then we're matchmaking experts by now.
Definitely we are. And we've helped so many people land that all-important first impression rose. And just like how on Tinder, your dating profile has to look good, you also need to present a solid application for landlords so you can really wow them and make yourself stand out from the crowd. And the same does go for landlords as well. It's really important to make sure that your listing photos and description look great so you can attract as many renters as possible. So here's how tenants can get that first impression rose. Number one, the most important thing is have a complete application. Don't leave anything out. Have a good credit score as well. And if it is your first time renting and you don't have a credit score, provide additional documents that can prove you can pay rent on time. And also be sure to provide reliable references, whether that's from a landlord if you've rented before or employers or something if you haven't. And also be sure you have a verified liv.rent profile if you are using our platform as well. And for landlords, you're obviously going to want to have professional listing photos, like I mentioned, nothing blurry or in bad lighting or anything. Try and write a really detailed listing so that tenants know exactly what they're getting into. Respond as quickly as possible to inquiries, and also be sure to get that verified badge and make sure your listings are verified as well. Before we talk about our trust score, let's quickly revisit our first poll now. Let's check out the results and see. So just as a reminder, we asked, have you ever been in a poor landlord-tenant relationship? And thankfully, the top answer from the audience was that no, all of my rental relationships have been great. The second answer was yes, I've had problems in the past.
Well, I'm actually very happy to see that relationships are very great out there. And for those who said you've had problems in the past, well, nobody said relationships would be easy, right? So I'm sure this webinar will give you the tools you need to foster better relationships in the future. For tenants on our platform, we use the trust score for the application process. If you've applied to rent home before, chances are you've had to consent to a credit check. I know it sounds scary. On liv.rent, we like to go beyond this by looking not just at your financial records, but also things like whether you've verified your income and employment status, if you have any publicly available court records, as well as a detailed risk assessment. Not everyone has a Canadian credit history yet, so our goal here was to give tenants who are new to the country the same opportunities to secure housing. All this information is combined into what we call a single score, the trust score, which landlords can use to evaluate your application. Even if you're not using liv.rent though, it's a good idea to have this information handy as you're searching for rentals.
Definitely. And the trust score is such a great tool for both landlords and renters. As the name suggests, it's all about ensuring transparency during the application process. So for renters, it's a really easy way to kind of show your suitability right from the start. And for landlords, it's obviously a great way to find your ideal tenant without the guesswork. Paula, question for you. Should renters still apply with all this information if they're not using liv.rent?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before, if you're not using liv.rent, it's definitely a good idea to have this information handy as you're searching for rentals. A pro tip of mine is to go the extra mile by pre-submitting your rental application even before you go for a showing. We know the rental market is pretty tough right now. Before you go to submit the application, though, make sure it has a real photo of yourself as your profile picture. You need to have a nice one. Please think about a LinkedIn photo, not a Tinder photo. Pet information if you have any furry friends, a quick line or two about why you're looking to rent. Use this chance to really sell yourself. And lastly, make sure your profile is 100% complete. If you're using liv.rent and if you have any troubles completing your profile, connect with our support team. We're here to help. While we're like Tinder for rentals, you can actually swipe left or right on homes, but you can browse and you will see right away that some listings, landlords and renters have a little verified check mark on their profile. That is awesome. Greg, you've mentioned verification a few times now. Would you mind explaining what we mean by verified on liv.rent?
Of course, yeah, I'd love to. So what do we mean exactly when we say the landlord, renter, or listing is verified on liv.rent? Well, like I said, we pride ourselves on being Canada's safest rental platform, which we've taken time to do by building a trusted community of renters and landlords. You really don't find this on too many other rental platforms like Craigslist, Kijiji, or even Facebook Marketplace here in Canada. Not only do we help protect our users from rental scams, we also take care to protect the data you input into liv.rent, which we do through multiple layers of encryption and security protocols. For each new profile, we ask that users upload a piece of government-issued photo ID, which one of our team members manually matches to the information on your account. We have similar measures for our listings as well. except we request land title documents that confirm the property's address. We don't have any Tinder swindlers here on liv.rent.
Oh my God, no, of course we don't. But really, jokes aside, renting on liv.rent gives both renters and landlords a peace of mind away from fake profiles and costly scams. Our extensive verification features are one of the most important parts of our platform and something we put a ton of time and effort into.
Definitely, yeah, we really try and take that guesswork out for all of you. So if you're ever in doubt, just look for that verified check mark. And I mean, the numbers really do speak for themselves as well. Verified renters are 77% more likely to get the first impression rose because they're seen as being more reliable as tenants. So getting verified really does increase your chance of securing that perfect rental. And for landlords as well, verified landlords get 3 times more inquiries than unverified landlords, and the verified listings receive 5 times the engagement compared to unverified listings. So lots of benefits, lots of reasons to get verified if you can. We're going to be running our next poll up on the screen now, so please let us know. This one's for the renters out there. What is the first thing you notice when you're looking at a listing? Yeah, please let us know using the poll. Okay, on to the next section. So what happens after you found the right one, got that first impression rose, and you think you're finally ready to make a commitment? We're going to be looking at some red and green flags you need to look out for next. Paula, what are some red flags that come to mind for you right away?
Well, Greg, some of the red flags renters need to watch out for are, number one, for sure, having suspicious photos or worse, no photos on the listing is the number one red flag. When the listing price is just too good to be true, that's the second one. Everyone loves a deal, but being aware of average rent prices in your area is so key here. Using unprofessional language and being unresponsive could be another one. And lastly, landlords who continually ask for money, such as a cash deposit upfront, are a huge red flag for sure. And these ones go for both parties. A lack of transparency, for example. If the landlord or tenant is unwilling to share their identity and they're not being upfront about their intentions, that's not a good sign. And the last red flag is if it's difficult to set up a viewing either virtually or physically, more often than not, this means something suspicious is going on. For both renters and landlords, it's important to educate yourself on rental laws so you have an idea of what's expected of you. And you can understand exactly what you can expect from the other party. In Canada, every province has what we call the Residential Tenancy Act, which is a piece of legislation that governs the landlord-tenant relationship and outlines specific rights and responsibilities for each. You need to be aware of those. Both landlords and renters have to follow these rules and guidelines to help keep each other safe. The best relationships are a two-way street after all.
Definitely a good point. It's really important to know what can and can't go on a lease and to know your local Residential Tenancy Act as well to protect your own interests. For those of you who aren't familiar, the liv.rent blog is full of resources to help you understand RTAs and the eviction processes in BC, Ontario, and now Alberta as well. So once you feel like you've really started to have a connection, you've educated yourself on the rental process, it's time to talk lease agreements.
Oh yes, and at this stage, things are in landlord's hands, unfortunately, or not. If you find a tenant with a great application who you know you can trust, you need to be prepared to take the next step. Tenants are the ones who apply, but the landlord is the one who has to review the application and eventually pop the question. The easiest way they can do that is by sending a digital contract for the tenant to sign and agree. Going paperless isn't just good for the environment, it's a great way to easily and securely keep track of any important documents that you may need, and it really speeds things up as well.
Yes, definitely, it so does, and it's always good to go green. And this feature is something liv.rent has had for years now. Right within the platform, you can send and sign standard BC, Alberta, and Ontario residential tenancy agreements right online as well as within our app. Not to mention, we also have a variety of lease addendums, which are vetted by our team of lawyers. And we also have the option to upload and customize your own as well if you do have those. So for landlords, addendums are a great way to bulletproof your lease and ensure everything goes smoothly throughout the tenancy, cover all your bases, etc. And I guess you could say they're kind of like a prenup for renting, if you want to put it that way.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. But before we jump into our next section, can we check the last poll results now?
Yes, definitely. Let's see what's going on. So we asked renters, what's the first thing you notice when looking at a listing? The top answer from the audience, not totally surprised with this one, but it is the photos. Paula, any thoughts on that result?
Photos for sure. We know that photos are certainly crucial. Who wants to go on a blind date with an apartment? Definitely not me. Remember, on liv.rent, you can not only go through the various photos, but also explore 3D tours and video showings, the perfect tools for busy renters and landlords.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks, Paula. Okay, back to leases now. It's worth mentioning that for renters, you're going to want to look closely at the lease because this is where some red flags might be hiding. Addendums are a great tool for landlords, but they can also be used to add conditions to the lease that aren't necessarily legally allowed. So always keep an eye out for those. This is where knowing your local residential tenancy act comes in. And also be sure to check for anything that seems off, whether it was added intentionally or by mistake. So property damage and maintenance responsibilities are one area where disputes can arise. For example, a landlord saying that tenants have to pay for basic repairs or to fix normal wear and tear. It's definitely a red flag because many of those repairs might actually be the landlord's responsibility. Late rent payments are another one where they might kind of try and hide some things. Obviously, one of the biggest fears every landlord has is their tenants paying rent late or missing payments entirely. So to avoid this, it's pretty common for landlords to add additional terms to their lease agreements regarding rent payments. For tenants, you should look over these terms and make sure you can agree to follow them. And for rent increases as well, this is a big one, especially these days. Please make sure you're aware of the maximum allowable increase of rent for your province. So for 2023 in BC, landlords can't raise rent by more than 2%. And in Ontario, the maximum rent increase is 2.5% this year. So any more than that, and you should kind of be a bit wary maybe.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know what? So much relationship tension happens over rent, which actually brings up a point that's very relevant for both landlords and tenants right now. So as we all know, inflation has made pretty much everything a whole lot more expensive, including mortgage payments and as a result, rental prices. Maybe you found the perfect listing or the perfect tenant, but you don't quite align on the rent price. Sometimes landlords and tenants need to negotiate a bit to find a price that works for everyone. Of course, you don't want to lower the price so much that your rental property becomes an expense rather than an income stream, but being a bit flexible can help you lock down an otherwise great tenant who might not be able to afford the listed price.
Yeah, definitely a great point, Paul, and very topical right now, obviously. Thanks for bringing that up. For renters, it's important to know how and when to negotiate rent. There's obviously better times than others. So we'd say the best time to negotiate is right after your application has been accepted, but before you sign the lease, because at that point you're obviously locked into whatever price you've agreed on. Our best advice is to be upfront and be realistic, more importantly. So be sure to research current asking rent prices in your area, which you can use our monthly rent reports for, and do see if the property you're applying to is in line with the numbers that you see there. And lastly, be very clear in your communication. Don't be too pushy, though. Obviously, even if you're the perfect tenant, landlords won't hesitate to move on if you try and lowball them too much.
Really great points. Thank you, Greg. So we've gone through a lot of red flags, but there are also some green flags in relationship, which are like the opposite. These are indicators of a person's character. Does your landlord respond to you promptly and politely, or do they miss messages and take a while to get back to you? Are they well organized or just all over the place? Are they polite? Do they seem well informed? Can they answer your questions? Do they know about the listing they are renting? So look at those green flags that indicate they are going to be fair, honest, reliable, transparent, and trustworthy. People who give you green flags, you know they deserve to get a rose. If you're seeing more red flags than green, well, I guess maybe they're not here for the right reasons. Right, communication is key for every kind of relationship, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely it is. And good communication skills are definitely a green flag, especially when it comes to renting. One way to build trust early on in the rental process is by using the trust score to help you identify the red flags and green flags right away. We already talked about the benefits of the trust score for renters, but let's talk quickly about what it looks like for landlords as well. So whenever a renter applies to a listing, landlords are able to see important details like a credit summary from Equifax, income and employment verification documents, and other key information to help you make a sound decision right away. All this information is broken down as well, so you can get a really thorough picture of what tenants bring to the table. But if you're in a rush and just want to screen tenants as quickly as possible, you can also see a single number, which allows you to easily filter out applications from tenants who might not be up to your standards. A really good trust score signals to landlords that the tenant is reliable and they're worth proceeding with a rental relationship. And reliable references do go a long way as well. So renters, please, again, don't forget to include those within your application.
For sure. And to be honest, going the extra mile and getting verified is important for both tenants and landlords to prove you're here for the right reasons and help you get the first impression rose.
Definitely. We've got our next poll going up on the screen now, so please let us know what you think. This one is for the landlords. What's your number one deal breaker when it comes to tenant applications? Please let us know and we will share the results shortly.
I'm really curious to see the answers for this one. Now, let's say you did all the work of putting your best self out there. You found someone and avoided red flags and found some green flags, and you've signed the agreement. Is the hard work all over? Once you do sign your lease, it's not like the work is done. Yes, the hardest part is over, but you can't just coast now because relationships need work, especially if you want to live happily ever after in your new home.
Yes, that's a great transition to our final topic today, which is happily ever after, or the final rose. Like I mentioned, this is going to be the final section of the webinar, and after that, we're going to head into our Q&A style live relationship advice column. Paula, I think you know how best to keep the flame alive, right?
Oh my God, yes, I certainly do. And let us know in the live chat too. We want to hear your tips for having a good long-term connection or stories about a particularly positive experience you've had with your tenant or your landlord. We'll shout out our favorite tips later on. Okay, for me, the key to a healthy, long-lasting rental relationship has always been communication. Oh my God, it's so important. When I was renting, I was really lucky to have landlords that were on the same page. So things like maintenance, repairs, and rent payment have never been an issue. The key is, of course, to be very upfront and address any concerns before they become an issue. Another thing is that we're all human, and I feel like at some point in our lives, everyone forgets to pay rent or is late at least once because it happens. So having a landlord that's understanding about minor mistakes is really important as well. Of course, clear communication is a key part of any good relationship, which is why liv.rent has an instant chat feature so that both parties can discuss rental-related issues like repairs or maintenance quickly and easily, as well as keeping a copy of the chat history if you ever need to go back and reference it.
For sure, that's definitely so true. And tenants want to rent from someone who's fair, and rent is probably one of the biggest snags that happens in a relationship between landlords and renters. It can obviously be pretty awkward when a landlord who loves their tenant realizes that their tenant doesn't or didn't pay rent for that month, rather. Then they may have to have an awkward conversation about it. Honestly, nobody wants to get a text from the landlord that says rent at 1 in the morning or whatever time it is. So if it happens, the renter does forget. If they're using liv.rent, then the landlord can just ping them through there, and the tenant can pay rent online through a platform by credit card, Union Pay, or even Bitcoin.
It's 2023. We shouldn't have to be using still, checkbooks and sticking checks envelopes. But if that's how you and your tenant or landlord like to do it, then by all means, as long as you keep the communication very open, and I think the relationship should go smoothly, and you really want to leave a lasting impression on them.
Definitely, and remember that even if you and your landlord aren't endgame, you still want to leave things on as good terms as possible. And you know what? We see this happen in Bachelor all the time. Even when they end the show and find someone they love out of all the potential matches, sometimes it still doesn't work out. So even if a landlord needs to evict a tenant or a tenant decides to give their notice and move out, we still want things to go well between the two of you and keep things friendly and amicable. When it does come time to end the lease for whatever reason, landlords and tenants can end or extend their tenancy right within the liv.rent platform, the same way you would start a tenancy. So there's no awkward endings here.
Yes, exactly. Just like how you wouldn't want to break and blow up the relationship entirely, there's a way to consciously uncouple yourself and stay on good terms with your landlord for sure. That's important because you may need to use them as a reference in the future for your next place. Plus, for landlords, you do not want a disgruntled ex-tenant who might try and blast you on social media, or worse, because they were unhappy with the way things ended. It's best to keep it classy until the end. Now, Greg, can we check the results of our last poll?
Of course, yeah, very excited for this one. So as a reminder, the question was for landlords, what's your number one deal breaker when it comes to tenant applications? And the top answer today was poor credit history, I guess not completely surprisingly, but some audience members also did vote, no landlord references and insufficient income to rent ratio as well. So pretty good spread. Paula, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, not surprised. And of course, references, credit, and financial background in general can be deal breakers when it comes to tenant applications. But I often say, don't forget to ask some valuable pre-screening questions. Here on liv.rent, we do have a list of 56 questions landlords should ask tenants, and they're absolutely crucial if you want to make sure that you are selecting the right applicant.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So there we have it. Hopefully this gives everyone some great tips on how to find their perfect landlord or renter, how to spot red and green flags, and how to keep the flame alive throughout the course of your tenancy. So without further ado, let's get into our Q&A session. We'll be answering all of your burning questions about rental relationships and giving our advice, so please don't hold back. So starting off today, our first question is going to be from Satchel. Thank you for your question, Satchel. Paula, is forcing a 6-month inspection of the unit, including taking photos of all personal belongings, normal, or is that something to be suspicious of?
Oh, wow. First of all, thank you, Satchel, for sending your question to us. The question I have for you here is, do you have those 6-month inspections as part of your lease agreement? Well, this is a very common clause that is often added as an addendum to the residential tenancy agreement. So if that's on your lease, yes, the landlord is entitled to actually go there and do an inspection. Taking pictures of all personal belongings, however, well, I wouldn't say this is something that landlords should be doing. So my tip is, if you don't feel comfortable with it, again, as we mentioned before, have an open conversation with your landlord. Kindly let them know and explain why you're feeling that way, and see if you can, perhaps change the way that setting is done.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Paula. Great answer. Next question is from Jim on Eventbrite. What are some common red and green flags when screening a tenant? Another good question.
Really good question, Jim. Thank you for sending it over. Well, we did talk about a few red and green flags, but whenever we're screening a tenant, some of the red flags can definitely be the lack of documentation. So for instance, tenants, when they don't have bank statements to provide, they don't have employment documents to give you, or even bad credit or poor communication. You're asking questions, they are trying to not answer them. So those could be red flags for sure. In terms of green flags, I would probably say very stable income or a strong savings. We do know that here in Canada, we do receive a lot of people from other countries, and they may not have employment yet, right? So in that case, having strong savings will be extremely important. So I'm probably talking about 1 year worth of rent here. I know it's hard, but it's something that will give you the peace of mind as a landlord. And apart from that, another green flag is definitely reliable references. And even if they're not from this country, they can provide you references from their own country as well.
Awesome. Great answer again. Thank you so much, Paula, for the detailed response. Hopefully that helps everyone out there. Our next question is from Vanessa. Thank you, Vanessa. We have heard my landlord will kick me out after the contract ends and rent it out for a higher amount. I'm quite afraid this will become true and quite scared of my landlord. Sorry to hear. Is that possible after a fixed term contract ends? The landlord can kick us out and rent the condo with a higher price?
First of all, Vanessa, I'm so sorry you're feeling that way, and I totally understand. There are a few instances where landlords can give notices to break the lease with tenants, and some of them may include when the landlord plans to use the property or when the tenant leaves in a subsidized rental unit and no longer qualifies for it. I'm not sure if that's your case. The RTB's website has plenty of information about your rights as a tenant, and we can certainly send you some resources later on after this live. The landlord won't be able to just kick you out like that just to increase the rental price. At the end of the day, the tip I always give is to openly discuss the idea and better understand what your landlord has in mind, so you can go from there.
Next question is from Soraya, also on Eventbrite. The question is, what should you do if your costs as a landlord are going up and you need to increase rent beyond the regulated amount? Good question.
Very good question, Soraya. And I actually get this question a lot. And I can probably say that the best option here is to have an open communication with your tenant. Of course, you do need to keep in mind, we've talked about it during this webinar, you do need to keep in mind the allowable rent increase rates. So for BC, it's 2% in 2023, and for Ontario, it's 2.5%. But if you feel like you do need to increase the price a little bit more, the question is, do you have a good communication with your tenant? Do you have a good relationship with that tenant? If you do have it, maybe ask them for a coffee or a lunch and then have an open conversation about it. say that, you know, your mortgage costs are increasing, your strata fees are increasing, and we know that for some landlords, the mortgage rates were increasing so fast, and some of them have to pay $1,000 or $2,000 more per month, and not being able to, you know, update the rental prices is a little bit tough. So having that open conversation with your tenant could be a good idea. And then if you do come to an agreement, you will be able to increase over that amount. Remember, you cannot enforce it, but yeah, just have an open conversation with them.
Definitely, good point. Communication is definitely so key in anything related to rent increases. Next question is from Selena on Eventbrite. Thank you, Selena. My landlord wants to increase rental fees. We were in a good relationship yet.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. So yeah, that's pretty much the same thing as Soraya was asking, but now on the tenant side. And I do understand it's tough whenever, you know, all the costs are increasingly higher this year and 2022 as well. If you don't feel comfortable paying the additional fee your landlord is proposing, again, open communication. You can just let the landlord know, explain your financial situation, and mention that, well, I'm not feeling comfortable with this right now. May I keep my rental price? And I'm sure your landlord will be kind enough to, you know, have an open conversation with you as well. And if you guys are not comfortable with a rent increase, you're not going to do it. Remember, your landlord is still allowed to increase the price by the allowable percentage. Again, in BC, 2% for 2023, and in Ontario, 2.5%. So you do need to keep that in mind. I often add, let tenants know that they should have that in mind after the first year of their lease agreement, and even add it to your budget. So after 1 year lease, you know the landlord will be able to increase, so just add that to your Excel sheet if you do have one.
Definitely awesome. Thank you for all those great answers, Paula. It looks like that's all the time we're going to have for questions today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and for engaging with us in our live chat. It was great to have all your responses out there, and hopefully our relationship advice column was able to help you with all your burning questions. Thank you all so much again for tuning in, and thank you for joining me today, Paula.
Thank you for chatting with me today, Greg. I hope that our audience got some helpful advice to make their relationship smoother. And if you're looking to learn more about rental relationships or getting set up with the liv.rent platform, you can book a demo with myself and my team using the link on screen and in the live chat as well.
Yes, definitely. And also make sure you subscribe to us if you haven't already, as we'll be hosting more live stream events just like this in the future. The next one we have planned is all about taxes, so do stay tuned for that one if you're interested. That's all for now. See you all at our next Liv Talk webinar. Bye for now.
Yeah.